again.
All right.
Okay. Oh, we're good. Okay. Sorry about that. And if you need to cut it short, just tell me because I don't want you to feel badly.
What are we doing with this?
What are we doing? We're going to post it in the Creative Activists Facebook group.
Oh,
And
good.
we're going to be able to talk about your, and you can keep talking about your event in June and your new book. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So, hi, everybody. I'm Ray Luskin, and I want to introduce you to my guest today, and that is Jan Phillips, who is a visionary thought leader. She's an award-winning author and speaker, a great photographer and poet, and she's the co-founder of Livingkindness Foundation. So welcome, Jan.
Thank you, Ray. It's great to be here. What an opportunity.
I'm so glad we connected. I know you from Marry Your Muse. That's where I first found you a long time ago, and I've followed your career.
Story.
Huh?
That's the Old Testament.
It was the beginning. It was the beginning of my love affair with your work. What can I say?
That was the beginning of everything.
Right. So why don't you tell us a little about who you are and your background, which I find fascinating, and how you became a leader, a creative activist.
Well, I started out by trying to be a nun, but that didn't work because I was too much of an original thinker. And at the time, in the late 60s, I was trying to prepare to take a vow of obedience, and I don't have I'm not predisposed genetically for obedience. So it was just a bad fit. And so when they kicked me out, I had to figure out how do you make a life that kind of feels like a nun, which meant I had components of a spiritual rootedness. It was value-laden and purposeful. And it had a creative kind of verve to it. And I made a lot of bad choices. First, I picked social worker because that felt like a nun in secular clothes. And it was kind of a fit, but that was more like being Mother Teresa. And I really was more geared to being Gandhi. So then I shifted into social activist. And that was the role for me. And that just means, there's no job descriptions for us, and there's not much money around for social activists. So you're constantly creating your life anew and responding to, the particular tragedies of the times and seeing which one calls me toward it. What can I do creatively to address it? And I felt like I was in dance school or something. I'm just dancing from one thing to another. So that is and was and remains the primary career around which I create a plethora of products in order to address the things that I am talking about. So while it started out in my early years being about, because I'm gay, and I experienced a great deal of homophobia. So I started out as a lesbian activist. And then it kind of softened and shifted a little bit and became more, a feminist thinker, a structural analysis person. And then, of course, always the peace movement, always the looking at why do we keep choosing war? Why won't we outlaw that like we outlawed slavery? And then other issues come along, climate, over the years for you too. It happens for all of us that different issues, the more information comes our way now because of the web. And so we have to really choose. I have a friend who's fighting GMOs. I have another friend who's dealing with the vaccine issues, but I keep having to say, not my issue.
Right.
Because we have to be very clear about what my issue is. Every one of us. And so my issue is simply to connect the dots between spiritual intelligence, to make, to have us rethink spiritual intelligence. Because as a Catholic, I was totally spiritually infantilized. And so, and help to figure out how to help people learn how to think, not what to think. And so that's my work, spiritual intelligence, creativity, and social action. So that's my little arena. I'm a master teacher, and that's why I did that. And I made a peace pilgrimage around the world in the 80s just because I didn't know what else to do after reading The 100th Monkey. And I had a delusion of grandeur thinking, wow, I could be the 100th person. I could be the one that carries this consciousness of peace to the person, the 100th person, the 100th monkey, as it reaches critical mass in the minds of humanity and a creative evolutionary breakthrough occurs. So, and it doesn't take language. And I'm a photographer, and, they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. And so I traveled as a photographer, activist with a slideshow on the peace movement, slideshow on the women's movement. And I just showed pictures of what we were doing in US and Canada to say the end of nuclear war and the end of this kind of ridiculous prejudice against women. And we haven't ended anything, and so I'm still engaged in that commitment. I don't call it a struggle because it doesn't wear me down, and I don't feel like I have my dukes up all the time. I'm just constantly providing the other side of the story by walking around with a huge torch when all I see is darkness on CNN or MSNBC, or I can't even look at Fox.
Yeah.
Right.
You need a vision, and you're carrying a vision of what peace can look like, what acceptance can look like, equality for women, and women as leaders. I mean, I love what you've done with your symposium, and I'd love people to hear about that.
Oh, that's such a great opportunity because women come together. My latest metaphor for what the problem is about women is it's a matter of decibel levels. I make CDs in the studio and I look at the sound engineer and he makes the decibel levels go up and down if I'm too low or too high or whatever. And I said, oh my God, the problem, it's a matter of decibels because the volume of men's voices are way too high. They're using up all the audio space. And so what we have to do is raise the level of women's voices and achieve some kind of balance in the matter of what women have to say and what men have to say. And then the world will see the distinctions and know what our choices are. But right now it's all 95% men talking, men talking, men talking. And so I created Women's Voices, Women's Visions as an opportunity for women to come together and practice being leaders in front of each other. And so in order to make it exciting and creatively seductive, I give 3 awards. I give $1,000 awards to 3 women who've been doing what you and I do, cultural activism, creative activism, for at least 25 years. And then I established these Eve Talks, which are like TED Talks, only Eve Talks stand for expressing values that are evolutionary. And so everybody wants to be able to do an Eve Talk, but here's what you have to do.
Me too.
Of course you do. And you should, because you fit the standards, which are pretty threefold and simple. One is you have to have accomplished something that has made a positive difference in the community. 2, you have to provide evidence of that success. And 3, you have to create a presentation that's entertaining and inspiring for us. So it's not hard. But it can't be just pipe dreams. It can't be women who say, oh, I'm going to. It's those of us who have done, who have succeeded, because we all know the obstacles are manifold. And so basically it's storytelling, which is the answer to everything, if you ask me. So the women stand in front of us. They say, here's the story. I had a dream. I ran into these 17 obstacles. I knocked them down one by one. I achieved this success. It's 1/10 of what I hoped for, but it's a big success. And she tells it to us and she'll sing it or have a poem or just, I don't know. They make very creative presentations for us. And we just hugely applaud them and stand up and cheer. And that's how the work continues. And so we build creative community in a really new and significant way, because there's a lot of time for spontaneous eruptions.
I love that. And that's sort of the model that I'm going after too, as far as creating that space and time when I have my conference in September, that there will be time for visioning, brainstorming. It's not just I'm here to listen to 80 speakers. It's doing the work as
Yes.
well, because I think that's important, because you got to come away with that really clear plan of how am I going to be the creative activist in the world? How am I going to make a difference, and some action steps that they can take that are baby steps, but they'll start them and get them strongly committed to their process and stuff. So I totally relate to what you're saying. So
we have a right and left brain approach to that, where in the morning everybody goes through 2 classes of kind of left brain training and how to really get clear on using social networking, what is a platform, how to build your platform, how to grow your platform, how to be better a writer. And so there's actual workshops that do skills training and skills building. But then in the afternoon, there's only art immersions. And so that's your chance to get totally immersed in some art form that you have been afraid to play with, like watercolor or mixed media or toning or singing or drumming or something. And so all that happened, and all the information that came in the morning has a chance then to drift down into the heart. And that's where things are transformed. When our intelligence reaches the heart, that's where heaven breaks loose. And so I think that's why the creativity is so exponential in that place. And I suspect you're probably going to do that at your conference too. But
right.
I
In
think
the morning was going to be information about how do you create, social enterprise, 501(c)(3)s, social media. Yeah, exactly. Because we need both. I mean, if you're going to be an activist or into social activism, you need both parts of it. You can't just
right,
airy fairy in your ideas, kind of thing.
Right.
So
yeah, to get really grounded and building our community out. That's the biggest challenge for everyone. It's like everyone now, especially you get to be 60, 65, and now we have Create Space, and so everyone can write a book, and everyone's writing their books, but nobody's buying anything because, well, you know why. I don't have to go into that, but we just really need to create our communities to show up as women of substance who have something consequential to say, and to say that and be that.
Right.
And, I know from my own life that, I was just Chattanooga, Fort Worth, Ontario, Canada, and I watch the transformation that goes on in the people who are in the room. And it's not huge groups, it's 80, 90 people. But that is a lot of possibility. And so every time we have these powwows where women come together, it's, they're all going, oh my God, it's so expensive. How can I afford to do it? And it's like, that's the great leap of faith, to know that you getting yourself to that event is the next step on the ladder.
Right.
Because all those women there are going to reflect you back to yourself, and you're going to know exactly what your next moves. Because we can't know that in isolation.
Right. We need community, and I know as an artist and a writer, I could spend all my time in my room, and it's like I need that sounding board, I need that support, I need somebody to say you're doing a great job, because my head goes into that spin of like, oh, who do you think you are? All this, you're not good enough. Those voices, no matter what I've done, I know they come back periodically, especially when I'm facing a new challenge. So. Yeah.
Well, fortunately, mine have disappeared off the ends of the earth,
wow,
and
I am impressed.
I'm happy for that. I never have those voices, but I do have voices now of discernment saying it's time for you to do less and be more.
What
kind
does that
of
look like to you?
Head towards a more of a sabbatical where I'm not doing so much active producing in the world, but staying more at home and harvesting the rest of, I got slides that are desperately wanting me to look at them and make something of them. And I'm too busy. Now I have this conference happening on the West Coast as well. So I have one in Skidmore in June, and one out here in August. And so my inner voice is saying, oh, then hit the pause button, Jan. Hit the pause button right there in August and go and stay in your own home and process what you have on your plate. I already have the next 4 books ready to be started.
Wow, that is amazing. Yes. I think you're right on though. We have to honor that space, especially as women in that third act. You know, you want to make a difference. You want to use your passion and your purpose, and you want to explode. Yet there's also that time for reflection and that wisdom. And I know I just became a grandmother this week, so it's like, you know, I want time there. So yeah.
Oh boy, yeah, there's a distraction.
Right,
wow.
Right. It's like, okay, today I'm running downtown as soon as our interview is over so I can go help my daughter, you know. So it's kind of thing. But, you know, it's that balancing act. So how do you renew and refresh yourself when you're so, you know, so busy and so much out in the world?
Well, I just did an hour of my spiritual practice. Before calling you, in my bed for an hour and looked at my burning candle and kind of feel that it's my homing activity. And it gets me back to my center and grounds me. And every day I do that committedly. And that's all I need. I don't need to take breaks midday too much. You know, it's like every night I go to bed saying, whoa, good, I get to do it first thing I wake up. It's my favorite time, you know. But it's like when I was in the convent, I lobbied we were all supposed to meditate at a certain time, 7 in the morning to 8 or something, or 5 p.m. to 6 or something. And I was lobbying the novice director saying, hey, this time doesn't work for everybody. Let us all do it on our own time because we're all temperamentally different. Some people are falling asleep at 5 o'clock. And of course, that didn't work, and that also contributed to them kicking me out. But anyway, each of us have to decide what is the practice that works best for us. But I'd say at least 20 minutes of absolute solitude and silence for every human being is a daily requirement if you expect to become effective as a creative activist, change agent in the world. Minimally 20 minutes every day, total commitment. That's just, forget it. I'm not even going to take you seriously. You know, it's like somebody comes up to me and says, I don't have time for a spiritual practice. I say, you know what? You sound like a woman who says, I don't have time to feed my baby.
Yeah. I know I have a spiritual practice I do in the morning and at night, and a ritual I do before I start writing or talking to people. So, yeah, it's a really important part of my day, and I don't care if it's 11:30 at night. If I have to do it, I'm committed to it. It doesn't matter. I do it before I go to bed. Yeah, it's just bottom line. Yeah, it's a bottom line thing. So I agree. So where do you get renewed? I mean, besides your spiritual practice, I mean, I know you take photographs of nature and things. Is there, you know, that kind of thing, walking, meditation? Do you have a favorite place on earth that you need to be?
Well, I think I realized today in my homing, in my practice, that wherever I am is the place.
Okay.
So I don't have to be any place particular, but I do love Maui.
Okay.
So I'm going to commit to be there next year. And I think, you know, it's pretty local. Having dinner or happy hour with good friends where they're like my little satellite dishes and I am theirs. And so they speak out, I receive them, and I reflect them back to themselves. And that's what we do for each other. That is really a beautiful local way to stay sustained. You know, after my partner died, I had to really recreate, how do I get myself heard? Mm-hmm. How do I hear myself back? Because she played that role so beautifully. And so now I just have a lot more gatherings at my house, you know, 5 or 6 women, the special ones, you know, the real special ones who know about balance and giving and receiving and that. And I tell you, it seems odd, but doing a weekend retreat for 100 people totally refreshes me. It never, ever drains me. It gives me life so much because, you never want to use the word channel, but we're vessels of intelligence being broadcast to the others. And so the vessel itself gets renewed in the process of intelligence going through it. So it's all new to me. The great news is constantly flowing to me as it is through me. So that's renewing. Every time I go out to any environment to teach, I'm renewed by it.
I love that. I love that. So I want to ask you, what is your definition of creativity?
Well, creativity is something original that is produced through me because of who I am. So actually, I'm not so much referring now to products like creating a book or creating a record or a CD. I'm talking about creating our lives. And so the act of creating one's life is an original act. Nobody else can do your life. I mean, unless you let them, you get to discern the basic parameters of your life. So it's conscious choices, it's conscious intentions, and it goes from having the thought to speaking the possibility to entering into the reality. Those are the steps of conscious creation. The mystics, Meister Eckhart says it like this: when the soul wants to have an experience of something, she throws an image of that experience ahead of her and then enters into her own image. So it's on an esoteric level or metaphysical level, creativity is the act of manifesting something from nothing. Nothing being the realm of the absolute, something being the realm where we dwell, the realm of the relative, right? Mm-hmm. And so we collapse the probability wave and pull down the experience that we are here to experience. Now, unfortunately, because we have no conscious awareness of this whole process, we often call those events tragedies and calamities because they're the big adventures that happen to us and for us. Somehow because our soul invited them in. But they come with some trouble because the trouble is grist for our mill, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole, that's why we're doing story spinning now, to really have women rethink the stories of their lives and the roles they played in creating those events and story spinning it so that you see, oh my God, it didn't happen to me, it happened for me.
Right. Yeah.
Like for 30 years, I thought.
What is the thing that you learned from that experience that made you who you are? So yeah. Yeah. And I mean, everybody has that. And if we allow ourselves the time, and sometimes it takes the time and the distance to look at that. But I totally agree with you that we have to reframe those stories of, lack of victimhood. And yeah, I was a victim, but I have a choice today. I have a choice how I look at the story, how I spin the story, how I want to present in the world. So I love that.
Yeah, and I only was a victim because I said I was.
Exactly. It's our choice. Yeah, it's the words we've chosen to use. Totally agree. So what are some of the steps that you suggest to women to start exploring that? What would they need to do to start exploring that concept of story spinning?
Well, I'm almost ready to put out a manual for this because I think it takes some steps. And it takes community. It takes a group of women because we have to hear each other into being, right? So you have to be willing to be vulnerable. I just did my first story spinning group here in this very office a couple months ago. And the steps are, okay, start with a story where you feel something happened bad to you. And then tell that story in that way, like you originally felt. They done me wrong. They kicked me out of the convent, right? And then revisit it and see, have you done any work? Have you changed that story in any way? Well, over the years, I've done a lot of therapy and did all these steps to get my heart healed from that, terrible, what felt so tragic to me. And so through that process of recovery, then I sat with the sister who was in charge of the community when I was dismissed, and she asked me to forgive her for the injustice that was done to me under her watch. And then she asked me to forgive the entire community. And when she asked for that forgiveness, I said, of course I forgive everyone. But in this huge voice from the heavens says to me, nothing to forgive. Nothing to forgive. And suddenly the whole story turned around, and I saw that instead they had given me 2 years to have a monastic experience, the likes of which was unbelievable. I got fully rooted in mysticism, fully rooted in, social activism, and how to know the difference between faith and religion. It was the most important 2 years of my life. And then they let me go. I didn't have to stay there wearing a habit with rosary beads around my legs. They let me go. And so what I was calling the worst thing that ever happened to me suddenly shifted and became the best thing that ever happened to me, and something that I co-created by being so disobedient, so gay, so all wrong for them, so myself. And so once you respin that thing, you go, oh my God. Unbelievable. I was caught in that story for 30 years, from 69 to 99, when I finally had that moment of illumination. So I'm saying it doesn't have to take us 30 years, but we need help. We need to be willing to process, be willing to be surprised, and be willing to be vulnerable in front of another person who's going to be our talk partner.
Right.
Because the insights will come to us. I'm going to do a guidebook, but, there's certain steps. But the insights, you could do it probably because you've done your work. And, you could probably facilitate that process for other people. You've totally done your story spinning. But I'm just saying that it is a process that is not difficult. There's nothing highfalutin about it.
Right.
It's just like rethinking it with a new imaginative twist, saying, did I create that in order for me to have a new opportunity in my life? Right. And if you ask that question, it's like, holy cow, I made that happen.
Yep. I totally get what you're saying. And there are those moments. We need to be, I think it's what you offer and what I offer. We create safe spaces for people to do that. And that's what they need to feel, that they can be vulnerable and share, and that their story will be honored and there will be no judgment. I think that's a really key piece that, I spent a long time trying to do it by myself, but, I always needed the witness, whether it was in a 12-step program, coaches, therapists, somewhere along the way, friends, to transform those stories. And there were many. And one of the most recent ones was a few years ago. I was working with a coach, and I still carried around "It's an Unsafe World," and it was like, oh wow, that has really informed, and I chose that, so it came back to me in many different forms, in relationships and feeling being attacked, whatever the story was, and it was like, wow, I can change that, but you need a person also sometimes to help you point that out. Like, that is a story you've been telling for 50 years. You want to continue that one or not? So.
Yeah, and how you just said it, I needed a witness, is true for every one of us. You need to have a witness to do this process, not because so necessarily that other person is going to give you something you can't provide yourself, but that other person is evidence that you're giving up the story, I'm going to do it alone.
Right.
Because there's no value in that story. I can do this by myself. There's no value in that story.
Right.
There's no power there. There's no, so what?
Right, and
look
we
at.
need to tell stories also because when other people hear them, they're inspired, they're motivated, and they can see there's possibilities of change and transformation. We're worlds of storytellers from ancient times. That's what we do, and that's
That's what
how
we do.
things change. And I think we need conversations, and these are conversation starters. If we want to change the world and create a more peace or whatever your issue, as you said, is. Yeah. So if we don't have the conversations, nothing happens.
Right. And I think that women have been kind of complicit in the background by our silence. Yes, it's true that we have been silenced, and that's a whole other thing about the patriarchy. But I don't let myself be silenced. I know that culturally women are silenced, but that's not even my issue so much.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, all right, we'll say it in the first 10 minutes, get it out of the way. But, hey, the more important thing is let's just get us starting to talk.
Right. Right.
Practicing the experience of being truthful about what do I know inside? What do I feel inside? How does it come out and not be mumbly? Because women are mumbling all over the place, and to just be so clear and direct and to say it and to not be victim-y. And there's a lot of remedial work in this area.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. This last year I spent some time taking improv classes, just to improve my ability to tell a story and to really place it in that form. So sometimes you got to grow and learn and challenge yourself to try something new, so that will.
What did you learn from that class?
I'm sorry, what?
What did you learn from your improv?
About opening my voice in a way and taking command of a stage, which I didn't feel as comfortable on before. Starting at one point, let's talk about this, then moving across the stage in three forms, with 3 points to a story. That was really helpful. And then coming back to center for the final part.
3 points to a story? What do you mean by that?
Okay, I was telling a story. Okay, this was my story at the time. That when I got divorced, one of the worst experiences, horrible points, was a low point, first holiday. So I went to the movies and I cried through a double header. I didn't know one word that came out. So I'm like devastated, and so I went to a 12-step program and they said, be of service, do something for someone else, you'll feel better. So the next holiday was Christmas, and so I went to Michael's because I'm into art, and I bought all these art supplies. I made goodie bags, and I took them to the local children's hospital. And so, as I went through this story, then I realized I've been doing that for 20 years because it made me feel good, and it also gave them something special. So it wasn't just about them, it's about me too. I mean, those are the gifts of being that activist, of being a philanthropist, of doing those kind of things. It's not just for them, it's for you, and you feel good. So, they had me walk across the stage and tell it in different portions, so it was a very interesting experience, and people really related to me, and like, wow, that was fabulous, because I know somebody who's gone through that, or, that kind of thing. So it was a great experience.
So you moved across the stage and you embodied and you told the story in 3 steps. What was the third step?
The third step is what I learned, how it impacted my life, and that it became something about me. It wasn't just about giving to them. It was about me and what I received, just like you were saying, you get you get renewed from your retreats. I get renewed every winter. I do this at every Christmas, and now I've expanded to taking cookies to the, to the ER nurses, and I do other things, and it just, I love it. And if I could I like being Santa Claus, or, and I want to do that. So,
yes. That's so great.
Yeah, so that was very cool. And that was just, so I'm working on that storytelling skill, and it's like, that's one of those things that I knew I needed to get better at. So, yeah.
Good for you.
Thanks. I wanted to ask you about your Lovingkindness Foundation. Or I should say Livingkindness. I said it wrong.
You should say Livingkindness.
It's Livingkindness, but to me it's loving.
Yeah, well, it all came about because my heart got broken over there in Nigeria when I went over to do a leadership retreat for a community of nuns. And I asked to the sister who ran an NGO that had built these schools for 20 villages, could I see a couple of the villages? And we went to the village one afternoon in the Range Rover, and there's all these kids standing in line outside of the school with their little uniforms on, waiting for the teacher who was never going to show up. And so the Range Rover, we pull in, and the kids all come running up. They open my door, they pull my shirt sleeve and drag me into their school and said, "Be our teacher, be our teacher." I never know what to do. I didn't know because I'd never been a teacher of little kids. I go, "Oh, wow. Well, what's 2 + 2? They go, 4. They were so excited. And I knew then that they really had learned, could learn, want to learn. So I thought, oh man, I got to make this trickier because these kids are pretty smart. I go, I'll trouble them with, what's 8 + 7? And they go, 15. And then I started to cry because I felt like, oh no, here's a whole village of kids that can't get educated because the teachers can't come because the roads aren't navigable. And I just said to them, look at you kids, I'm not your teacher, but I am the one who's going to get your teachers here. So you're lucky to meet me today, and I'm lucky to meet you because I'm the one with the magic wand. And so in a very short time, there's going to be something here where your teacher can live. And so they said, okay, and we left, and I talked with Sister Rita, my cohort, and I said, oh man, what do we got to do? We got to build like a teacher's house here or something. So we fleshed out the idea. I went home, I started the Livingkindness Foundation because people want to give money. If you're an established 501c3, they can get a tax write-off. That took a night and a day, a lot of money. But so what? You go through all that. So I got the thing established. I started raising money. But to tell you the truth, the Women's Voices, Women's Visions is a fundraiser for the Livingkindness Project in Nigeria, because every single cent of profit that we make goes to Nigeria. So the good news is 4 years ago, my heart broke open, and now there is a learning center with 2 apartments for teachers at that place in that village. And I have sent $25,000 over there. I should say, grassroots activists over there. And now I am working on the next 25,000, which will be solar power and computers, and then my job there will be done. So I would say that's creative activism, and that's what the Livingkindness Foundation has. It's global and it's local, because even though I have a leg in Nigeria to make, this is 500 kids from 5 villages now who will be coming to the Livingkindness Learning Center. So that's good news. But I always want to have a local focus so that I'm producing events of value for people in my own community. And that's why I'm starting the Women's Voices here in San Diego. And we're on our 3rd annual one at Skidmore.
That's cool. So tell people when they are, both of them, and so how they can.
Okay, June 4 through 7, it's at Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs, upstate New York. And August 13 through 16 at University of San Diego in San Diego in California. I think the most important thing is if women feel like, oh my God, I want to get in her loop, that they should just sign up for my newsletter by going to janphillips.com and say, I want her newsletter. And then they'll constantly be in the loop because that goes out every 3 or 4 weeks, and it says all the information everyone's going to need.
And it always
about
has a
feeding
poem
their
in it.
soul.
And it has a poem that people can read. That's always, yes, it's very wonderful. Yeah.
Poem and cartoons. I try to make it funny and deep and heartfelt so that people both cry and laugh by the time they've got to the end of it.
I have a couple.
I sent out one yesterday about the Women's Voices event, and I cried all the way through writing it.
Oh.
Because it's such a poignant event. And I'm trying to get women to make their discernment. Should they go or should they not go? You know, because if they think of it as an art or activist event and they don't feel creative or like an activist, they're going to go, it's not for me.
Right.
But I'm saying, no, that's not the question to ask. If you're a woman, it's the place for you. Because it's about us building a new sisterhood for a new time and creating a world for our children and for our, nieces and nephews and our grandchildren, and showing how, actually exhibiting the ways that women make magic when they come together. Because, well, how can they ever know that? They need to see pictures of that. And so we videotape it, and there's movies of it. So they can go to Women's Voices. Sorry. They can go to Women's Voices, womensvisions.com in order to get information about the one at Skidmore. And they can go to University of San Diego and put in, we're so smart with Google these days. You just Google Women's Voices in University of San Diego and it comes up.
Perfect.
So, but if they're on my newsletter list, they will get all the information they need.
Well, I want to say thank you so much, and I know you're not feeling well, so I appreciate your time and all your wisdom and what you shared today, because I know you are going to inspire so many more, and I can't wait for people to hear you and find out more about you. So thank you, Jan.
How do you share this, Ray?
This will be on our website. It's going to be also, it'll be on YouTube, so that it will be out there.
Well, send me the links and I'll send the links out to everybody.
Okay, sounds great. I will do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Feel better.
Bye. Yeah.